He sent the message at 11:47 p.m., then immediately checked to see if she'd seen it. She had. No reply came, so he sent another one softer this time, more careful, more small. That second message is where everything begins to unravel. Not the silence. Not even her, but what he decided that silence meant about his worth. Because somewhere between the first message and the second, a man stopped being a person and became a petition. And the question is, how did he get here? How does a man with a job, a spine, a life, end up refreshing a screen like he's waiting on a verdict? And more importantly, when he finally gets a reply, why does it feel like oxygen instead of just a text? Watch what happened 3 weeks before that night. He met her. There was real warmth, real conversation. She laughed in a way that made the room smaller. He felt chosen. And that feeling, that specific feeling, became the thing he'd later chase at the cost of everything quieter inside him. The first 2 weeks, she was present. Replies came fast. Plans were made and kept. Then something subtle shifted. A 3-hour gap became 6, became a day. He noticed, said nothing, and quietly adjusted his behavior to manage her temperature. That adjustment right there was the first surrender no one talks about. He didn't lose her attention because he did something wrong. He lost his footing because he started treating her comfort as more important than his own clarity. Psychologists call this self-abandonment, when you edit your instincts to protect someone else's mood. It doesn't look dramatic. It looks like being easygoing. It looks like patience. But over time, it trains the other person to expect a man with no floor. She pulled back not necessarily with cruelty, sometimes just with her own confusion or avoidance. And he leaned in further, softer, more available, more apologetic for things that weren't his fault. He sent the voice note, explaining himself after she canceled plans without reason. 6 minutes long. Calm tone. Completely unnecessary. She listened to it. The 2 gray ticks went blue and replied 2 words. I know. That was the crumb, and he told himself it was enough. Here's the brutal clarity line this entire story is building toward. Begging for love doesn't fail because it's unattractive. It fails because it teaches both of you that your presence has no value without her approval. Read that again if you need to. Now here's what most men get wrong about this moment. They think the problem is that they showed emotion. It isn't. They think the fix is to go cold, to disappear, to manufacture mystery. It isn't that either. The real problem is that he outsourced his self-assessment to someone who was still figuring out if she even wanted to be there. You don't beg for love because you're weak. You beg because intermittent reinforcement is neurologically identical to gambling. 1 warm reply after 3 cold days hits the brain's reward circuit harder than consistent warmth ever does. That's not a character flaw, that's a mechanism, and you can interrupt it if you recognize it. The near miss happened on a Tuesday. She texted first for the first time in 9 days, casual, light, like nothing had passed. His instinct fired immediately. She's back. Don't ruin it. Be warm. Be available. Be what she needs right now. He replied within 40 seconds. He made a joke. He suggested plans. She left him on read for 6 hours and came back with, maybe we'll see. And he said, no worries. Whenever works for you. That line, whenever works for you, was the white flag he didn't know he was waving. Because what it communicated wasn't flexibility. It communicated that his time had no shape. That he was a room she could enter and exit without consequence. A man with standards doesn't disappear, and he doesn't perform coldness. He simply stops, moving towards someone who keeps stepping back. He says less. Not because he's playing a game, but because there's genuinely less to say to someone who isn't showing up. He makes plans with his own life, not to make her jealous, but because his life was always supposed to be the main event. The version of him that sent that 11:47 p.m. message was a man running on anxiety, not affection. Love doesn't feel like dread. Attachment that's real doesn't make your chest tight every time you open your phone. If checking her online status has become a reflex, that's not romance, that's monitoring, and you deserve a connection that doesn't require surveillance to feel real. So this week, one concrete step. Identify the one behavior you're doing to manage her reaction, not express your truth. Maybe it's the over-explaining. Maybe it's the double text. Maybe it's saying, "It's fine," when it isn't. Name it. Stop doing it once. Notice what happens to your posture when you don't perform availability. The second step. Give yourself a quiet exit criterion, not a punishment, just a line. Something like, if I've reached out twice without a meaningful response, I stop reaching. Not forever. Not with bitterness. Just stop and mean it. This isn't about winning. It isn't about making her miss you. It's about being a man whose care comes from fullness, not from fear of being left. If this script handed you something real today, a mirror, not a lecture, stay in this space. There's more here for the man who's done performing and ready to actually understand himself. Because the final principle is this. The man who stops begging doesn't become cold. He becomes someone worth staying for, starting with himself.